Hey, welcome to this webcast. It's great to imagine you there. Can't see you, but I can imagine you. This is summer, so things are a little bit different. A few announcements before we begin with a short meditation. First of all, just to let you know, there'll be no mindful dialogue for the summer. So we're going to give Tara and Ray the summer off. And a couple of quick thank yous. First of all, to our producers, to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo. Thank you for all you do to get this out there. Also, a big thank you to our mindful movement teacher. If you are drawn to the whole experience here, you can, at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, do some mindful movement with either Rita, Anna, or Lynn. That takes you right here to 7:30. And during the summer, we're making this an hour-long session, so it's a shorter class, a shorter meditation, same length talk. Got a newsletter with monthly updates, kind of a summary of talks and my photography for the month. There's also a weekly, if you're interested, telling you about what's up next. And as always, just have to say thank you for your support. This is all offered freely in the spirit that no one should be denied access to these practices and teachings, no one interested. So your support truly helps me get it out there. There are expenses and all that kind of stuff. And of course, I have my lavish lifestyle to maintain. I guess that's it. So let's do a short meditation, and then we're going to explore this topic of how my practice has evolved with some reflections on how your practice may be evolving. So feel free to reach your arms up overhead, to stretch, to move out. Move in any way that feels good. Let out any sounds. You might want to make sure your cell phone is on stun. You won't be disturbed for this next period of time. This will be approximately a 13-minute meditation. So let's see how quickly we can shift from the outer world to the inner world, from future and past to more present moment awareness. So as you're ready, you might close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, take a few moments just to notice what's happening. Notice the sounds. Notice the air touching your skin. Feel the space around you in your room. This practice of closing your eyes is really quite symbolic. It's this movement from focus on the outer world to heightening awareness of the inner world. And a very powerful way to shift your attention is to focus on your breath. So you might breathe in slow and deep and smooth to the count of 4 or 5. And then move right into the exhalation to the count of 4 or 5. And for this next period of time, notice what it's like to bring all of your attention to the sensation of breath. Notice how, as you feel the breath on the inside, there's a gathering of attention. As in any concentration practice, when your mind wanders, bring it right back, right back. Now we're going to do a little bit of a shift. If you can, maintain the inhalation to the count of 4 or 5, but on the exhalation, just let the breath completely relax and fall out of your body. Notice what could relax or soften on the out-breath. And now with each breath out, notice how much more you could relax and let go. And now, if you like, release any control of the breath. And sense if you can maintain this sense of intimate connection to the experience of the breath on the inside. And notice if you can feel from the inside out the scalp and the crown of the head. Feeling from the inside out your forehead, the muscles around the eyes. And over the next few rounds of breath, explore what it's like to relax and soften your tongue. Relax and soften the jaw, the inside of the mouth. Relax and soften all the muscles of your face. Can you relax and soften the back of your head and the base of your skull? Feeling from the inside out the shoulders, the length and the weight and the volume of your arms. And the backs of your hands. And the palms. Over the next 3 exhalations, how much more could you soften and relax your belly, the lower back? How much more could you soften the floor of your pelvis and the hip joints? Feeling from the inside out the length and the weight and the volume of your legs. The soles of your feet and your heels. Is there anything right now on the inside that could relax, that could let go? And let your attention now move to an anchor of your choosing, to the breath or sound, or maybe the feeling in the palms of your hands. And for these next few minutes, let your primary attention be to rest at this juncture, this experience of the breath, of sound, of feeling, sensing from the inside out. From time to time, you might refresh this sense of deep relaxation and at the same time, this quality of alertness. may notice as you again and again re-relax and re-arrive here at your anchor, a sense of the periphery, kind of the background. Noticing from this perspective of the observer everything that is changing. Exploring, if you like, what it's like to be intimately present, but at the same time, to allow things to be as they are. Noticing the flow or the stream of your experience. And you might explore, if it resonates for you in these remaining minutes, to explore moving from the sense of doing and focus to more of the sense of being and allowing. From time to time, you might re-engage with your anchor. And then open to this sense of relaxed, open awareness. Awake to what is changing, and this sense of spacious allowing. You might very gently, in your own time, begin to lengthen the breath just a little bit. Again, sensing from the inside where you feel the breath. Notice what may have shifted, what may have changed for you in these last minutes of inner focus. And as you're ready, you might let your head drift a little bit to the left and right. Let your body move and stretch in any way, taking your time for your transition. Welcome back. We're going to move right into this talk, part 2, on how my practice has evolved. This is somewhat autobiographical, but I hope you'll find it helpful. I'll be talking about some of the changes in my 50 years of practice and offer some reflections on how your practice may be changing and evolving as you have changed and evolved. So please enjoy. Welcome. Every time at New Year, I like to make aspirations. It's a little moronic, maybe. It is a good way for me to evaluate and focus, and it's been a big part of my life. But I always remember this one beautiful quote from a monk who wrote something to the effect of, "Another new year, no change, same foolish monk." I kind of like that. you know, um, and I wonder how much has changed in my life. How much has changed in your life? There's a classic thing. I mean, imagine yourself brushing your teeth when you're 6 years old, and when you're brushing your teeth now, when you look in the mirror, obviously you're older. But has the you looking at yourself changed? It becomes a really interesting question around what doesn't change. Someone once said that inside every old person is someone thinking, what the heck happened? While I feel physically older, and I think the main thing is, a little more sagging in my face, certainly migrating hairline, but do I really ultimately feel differently than I did when I was a kid? I think the awareness is still there. Certainly, there's this paradox of how my meditation practice has, on the one hand, helped me to sort of stay in touch with that essential quality of a non-preferential awareness, which I believe hasn't changed. And yet at the same time, a lot has changed. I mentioned in the last talk, when the Buddha was asked, how can you tell your practice is having an effect? And he said, are you more or less gripped by greed, hatred, and delusion? That's such a wonderful way to kind of evaluate as to how your life is going. When you look back over the last years, do you feel more or less gripped by greed, hatred, and delusion? Sometimes life evolves in leaps. It's been said that evolution is not a steady line, that it usually happens in leaps. And so sometimes we have these profound insights that arise. We suddenly a recognition of like, oh my gosh, the scales have fallen from my eyes and now I see clearer. And sometimes practice is comprised of these insights, but not for everyone. Pema Chodron spoke about this. She has been meditating for ever. And she said, when I hear about people having breakthroughs, she said, I always get a little jealous because I've never had a breakthrough. But when I look back over my life and my practice, I realize that I'm a different person than I was a year ago or 2 years ago. She said, for me, life has been a practice of gradual awakening. Practice has been a practice of gradual awakening, and that may be so for you. It's a sacred, classic hero's journey we're on. To feel the call to practice, and then to pursue it. We are navigating this life which is filled with so much distraction. The 8 worldly winds. You're trying to find your way through life and you're buffeted by desire and by aversion. The desire for success, to win, for fame. And by the fear of failure, of shame, of pain, of loss. How do we find a steady way through? For me, this has been the power of my own practice. And I would like to, in this little time, is to continue where I left off last time. I spoke about the call to practice and how we have this drive to be somebody. And that drive to be somebody evolves into the drive to be somebody special. And ultimately, I think, the call to be nobody special. When we set it all down. The call to practice, it's huge and it's rare. There's some line, I think it's in the Vedas, that says, to take human form is rare. To take human form and be exposed to the Dharma, to truth, to perennial truth. Extremely rare. To take human form, to be exposed to truth, and to contemplate perennial truth. Even rarer. To take human form, to be exposed to truth, to contemplate truth, and to engage in the act of practice. Extraordinary. And to take human form, to be exposed to truth, to contemplate truth, to practice, and to give yourself to it fully. The rarest of the rare. And so something has called you to practice. Something's called you to listen to this talk. And I honor, truly, truly honor that. One of the greatest joys in my life has been to be around people who are sincerely practicing. My 24 years in an ashram, in a spiritual community, as I would say, how incredible it is to be surrounded by maniacs for God. To be around people who want what you want. It's fantastic. Because we truly resonate with the people we spend the most time with. My classic joke, which you may have heard. I read a Forbes article saying if you take your 5 best friends, average their income, it's probably your income. When I read that article, I had a profound realization. I needed new friends. But the truth is, we do resonate with people we spend the most time with. And it's one of the most important elements in practice is to align yourself with people who want what you want. I had mentioned before my introduction to meditation when I was 15, which happened to be transcendental meditation or mantra meditation, which became for me my staff. I hung on to it for all it was worth, partially out of fear, because I could feel how my life would kind of fall apart when I didn't have that grounding, and partially out of incredible joy. The presence it gave it gave me, the confidence it gave me, it's fantastic. As I mentioned in that talk, I felt like I had the keys to the secret garden. And so I pursued it. I was very, very engaged into the TM community, Transcendental Meditation. I did advanced courses. I assumed I would be a teacher. And I assumed that I would do their advanced courses. And where I left off last time, I was on my way after being in the Peace Corps in West Africa and having attempted to cross the Sahara Desert from the south to the north on a bicycle, which I do not recommend. I underscore the word attempt. I went back to France, tried to recuperate. I was just exhausted from my adventure. The hot season came early. There were these harmattan winds, these dust-laden winds that came down off Algeria that were just awful. And I got chronic nosebleeds, became anemic. It was pretty awful. One of the main reasons for that trip was to find a place where I could practice. Part of my plan was to go up through Algeria. I was going to go to the Hogar Mountains. There were these really cool monasteries that I wanted to check out. Go up to Algiers, and I was going to turn right. And there was a Findhorn community in Tunisia I heard about. I thought maybe that's where I'll find my path. To my utter surprise, as my body was kind of broken down and as I was in Paris with friends and realized I had to go get some help, I went back to my parents' farm in Pennsylvania, which was the last place on earth I wanted to go. And there, my mother recommended I go and see a homeopathic physician at this ashram, this place called Kripalu Center. And there I was surprised to find hundreds of people who were practicing And after speaking with the doctor who is a depth practitioner, Dr. Jeff Migdow, if you ever run across him, wonderful, wonderful guy, I realized maybe this is where I'll recuperate. And I ended up staying for 24 years. But I hadn't quite settled at that point. So I'll kind of pick up the story from there. One of the interesting paradoxes of where we kind of left off was that when you practice, when you are kind of letting go of the natural desire of the mind to move into greed, to move into hatred, and to be confused, when you let that go and let yourself be refreshed from presence, you'll feel more alive. As I mentioned last time, you feel better. You feel your anger better, your rage better, all your just undigested experiences better, but you also feel joy, compassion, kindness. You feel all that better as well. And I certainly felt much more alive in my life. And in the transcendental meditation culture, one of the courses to take was called the Siddhi course, Siddhis. The Siddhi were these practices that dramatically kind of evolve the brain. So the whole idea is you go to a very, very deep place of stillness, and then you would do these visualizations that would flood certain parts of your brain with awareness. And then there were these outer ways of measuring the effect of the practices, and quite dramatic, quite controversial. Levitation, kind of clear seeing, omniscience. They had these domes built at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, where people would practice levitation. Pretty cosmic and pretty dramatic, and it was pretty attractive. So I had my $3,000 of resettlement allowance, and the course cost that much, and I was on my way. But I stopped here, and I met with the guru. I told him where I was going. And he had mentioned to me how purifying your desires is more important than cultivating special powers. Being in I must have been 23, 24, and being very caught in sort of like the mystery and the drama and all that stuff, I was called to the bells and whistles that come with dramatic stuff. It'd be really fun to learn how to levitate and be somebody special. But I was also just excited about the whole idea of being so deeply immersed in practice. And he said something really powerful. He said, when you look at scripture, you handle the siddhis, like you handle the powers that come from meditation, like you handle excrement. You don't play with it. And he talked about how if you don't purify your desires, whatever merit, whatever benefit comes out of your practice is going to go into those, you're going to pour it into those desires, which are just going to get you into more and more trouble. And my God, we see this all the time. You see this with people who are really, really young and get really famous. And you see what they do when their desires aren't purified, the trouble they get into. That really clicked for me. And I thought, that's true. I need to focus on that. And so I elected to kind of move into the ashram. Now, up to that point, I had been a practice of mantra meditation. Twice a day, very, very religious. And I had quite a shock when I moved into the ashram. Really wonderful people in the ashram. And I remember someone saying to me, are you coming to meditation tonight? And I thought, wow, well, yeah, I love meditation. So I went to meditation, and I was in the back, and here was this room full of people, and everyone's wearing white. I didn't have any white clothes at that time. And then in comes the guru, this guy I was just talking to that afternoon, and he's wearing a robe, and he's got long. He looks the part. I mean, totally looks the part of the guru. And he's sitting up front, and he has a harmonium, which is kind of a little organ, and you have a bellows, you move with your hand, and he starts chanting. And the place kind of goes wild. And by wild, I mean crying, emoting, pretty nutty. And then it got very, very still. And then he started doing this mantra to the Divine Mother. And then the volume of the emotion got more intense. And I thought, what is going on here? And then at some point, as he's playing the harmonium, he stops, and then he goes, ha, like that. And this shockwave went through the room. And I was in the back, like against the wall, like, what the? But I watched people, it would hit them. And then it hit me right in the chest. And I just felt this warmth coming over me. And I got very, very quiet. And it was bedlam in the room. People shaking, people dancing, people crying. And I thought to myself, what? Everyone is so nice during the day. What the heck is this? And I learned about Shaktipat and Shaktipat Diksha. So Shaktipat Diksha is the capacity to awaken energy in other people. And my teacher's teacher was a very amazing teacher, Swami Kripalu, after whom this center was named. He had practiced meditation for ever since he was a young boy, but he had been in silence, I believe, for 19 years, practicing 10 hours a day. And he had just gone back to India to die just before I moved in. And he sort of, according to the story, gave this capacity to his primary student, who was the guru in residence. So every morning and every night for about 4 months, I was getting microwaved. And I found with people like dancing and shaking and barking and all that stuff, the next day I was shaking and barking along with everyone else. I just felt this energy. Wow, really, really. It was a drug. It felt like a drug. And I wanted more. And so did everyone else. So I abandoned my transcendental meditation practice because there wasn't time. The schedule was 6.5 days a week of seva, of selfless service. You're given a job. You had Sunday afternoon off. And living in the ashram was like military. In fact, I was living in a tent in the campground there. And someone came and set up his tent next to mine, and he happened to be in the military. He had been the helicopter pilot for Swami Satchidananda, and he was doing his 2 months a year service locally. So he was camping. I got all these great photos of him taking off his flight suit and having his yoga whites underneath. But he told me how much living in an ashram was like living in the military. You had a tightly controlled schedule. You had a uniform. You were told what to do. And the whole focus was on service. Just kind of like do what you're told and kind of surrender to the flow. It was a very profound time for me. 6.5 days a week of really, really focused work. Starting in the morning very, very early with yoga and meditation, every night ending with yoga and meditation and chanting. So the form of practice we did at that time was very much along the lines of classical yoga. And this became something I really have come to embrace. I'd like to talk a little bit about it and offer some reflections for you to kind of sense, is there anything in here that resonates for you? What I discovered was practicing in the context of Raja Yoga is a very interesting way to practice. The analogy that I like to use is that what Raja Yoga says, and I'm way oversimplifying here, is that if you want to get to the top of the mountain, you have to start at the bottom of the mountain. And the very bottom of the mountain has to do with your ethical behavior. Where are you leaking energy? And so, like in all traditions, just like we have the 10 Commandments and we have all the other ethical guidelines in all the traditions, yoga has the yamas and niyamas, the observances and restraints. In Buddhism, we have sila. The 10 Commandments are very similar to the observances and restraints. The main difference is they're not so much thou shalt not, as opposed to a description of an awakened person. An awakened person doesn't steal. An awakened person doesn't create harm to others, etc. That's the foundation. And what this does is when you are consciously not murdering people, your meditation's going to be a little bit clearer. It's setting up riverbanks. I'm not going outside of these riverbanks. And what happens is your energy gets more focused. So the next step you do is you focus on purifying the body through asana. So purifying the body is consciously moving in and releasing the deep-seated tensions in your body. It's about actively engaging. What am I holding on to? Where am I holding it? How can I let go? When you release that deep-seated tension, of course, you're freeing up energy. You've got energy available. Now, then you can move to the next step, which is consciously using breath. Breath is a very powerful way to focus your attention. It's a very powerful way to concentrate. It's also a very powerful way to change your state. Anytime you're upset, anytime you're angry, anytime you are feeling separate, chances are your breath is compromised. It'll be ragged, it'll be shallow, it'll be irregular. Anytime your breath is smooth and slow and deep or focused, chances are that is going to reflect in how you feel. So conscious breathing becomes part of the practice. That sets you up for the next step, which is absorption. The outward moving mind becomes more aware, more self-absorbed. So you begin to move from the outer focus to an inner focus into more and more subtle awareness. And here, this sets you up for meditation. And there are 3 stages according to Raja Yoga. There is concentration and willful effort. There is opening to the awareness of flow. And then there is surrendering and resting in presence. So you can think of this as focus, flow, and let go, a phrase I tend to use a lot. So if you're a yogophile and you're familiar with these stages of yama, niyama, ethical behavior, asana, purifying the physical body, pranayam, working with breath, pratyahara, the drawing inward, and dharana, dhyan, and samadhi, this is the formula for practice. And it's the formula that I used for many, many years. You can play with a ratio of how you use that. And because we were young and we were also doing a lot of other deep austerities, we're moving a lot of energy. The breath techniques can be as simple as, controlling the breath, matching the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, as we do quite often in meditation. But they can also involve balancing both hemispheres of the brain using Nadi Shodhana and Anulom Vilom. It's also energizing the body with fast, rapid breath. We did all those practices. And the practice that we also did, very, very different from what I'd ever done before, was really focusing on moving the energy up. When you free up all that energy, you're moving subtler and subtler and subtler. And we would do a third eye meditation where we'd bring our attention kind of here, which can be quite a phenomenal experience. Dramatic. Not a practice that I do anymore. So this practice of moving through these stages from the gross to the subtle, very, very powerful. But it was also coupled with really kind of a couple other elements. One of them was the whole idea, the whole concept of seva, S-E-V-A. Seva is a reference to the selfless service. It's really about that purification of desires that I was talking about earlier. It's about letting go of your agenda and opening into being of service to others, like losing yourself in service to others. So that's kind of what we did, 6.5 days a week. So that was very, very powerful for me. The idea of actively engaging, but letting go of the fruits of my action. Channeling the energy into service. But of course, these were kind of heady days in ashrams back in those days. So we added a little more to it. Again, the whole idea is turning your attention toward the divine, tightening the riverbanks to stay focused. And we engaged into a practice of what's referred to as Brahmacharya. The word Brahmacharya is translated roughly as renunciation. Another way of articulating that is renouncing what takes you away from your goal. What that involved for me and for the community was a poverty vow. So for many, many years, I received $28 a month in exchange, clothing, food, all that stuff. After I think about 12 or 13 years, that got bumped up from $28 a month to $35 a month. I remember being with some friends once, and one of my friends was an executive, sales executive. Another friend was, he ran a magazine, and they were talking about money. And I said, yeah, I make about 400. And they were like, I could just see them going like 400 a week, a day? I said, yeah, 400 a year. But I really liked it. I loved the focus. I felt like it was all working for me. But one of the elements, just to name it, and this could be a separate talk, is taking a vow of celibacy. Again, letting go of what takes you away from your goal. Now, there are a couple things about that. Being in my 20s and in my 30s, taking a vow of celibacy it felt like cruel and unusual punishment. But what I found pretty quickly was how much of my attention was going into the possibility of relationship. And I noticed that I had this internal element of the sort of binary scanning device of someone who was makeable or not makeable. Either you're a possible partner or you don't exist. And then I saw this whole inner stance of how I would present myself to those who were attractive to me. And because I took a vow not to act on it, what truly blew my mind was people I would have wanted to be intimate with, because I didn't. They became friends. And I would not have had the emotional maturity to maintain a relationship with them. So I felt my heart just exploding in this practice. And just as I became kind of attached to my meditation practice, I became attached to that vow, because it felt like it was a power practice. It really helped me focus. It fueled my life. It fueled my meditation practice. Now, one of the things about how I had been practicing through the lineage of transcendental meditation and the lineage of this ashram was what it was like to be part of a lineage. Now, being on a lineage path is about having a teacher who has a teacher who has a teacher who has a teacher. And the idea is, if you focus on your teacher, surrender to your teacher, you're surrendering to that lineage of wisdom. There's some positive things about this. There's hopefully a sense of quality control. That your teacher's teacher selected your teacher because they were worthy. The downside is when you're in a lineage tradition and the focus is on the teacher, your teacher gets really imbued with a lot of charisma. And it becomes a very devotional quality that is ripe for all kinds of nefarious things. And because our particular teacher was able to invoke these very profound states through Shaktipat, the organization became immensely devotional, myself included. Everyone wanted to get as close as they could to the source. One of my first seva positions was doing editing with him, because I come from a writing background and so forth. So I got in there as close as I could. I learned massage techniques. I was part of his meditation team for a while. Over time, I would lead the retreats on the road with him, that drive to get as close as I could to the source, along with everyone else. So what this brings up, and what I wanted to offer as a reflection, is at that time, those kind of like the heady days of ashram, and there were ashrams all over the place, and they were at their peak. And we had this explosive growth. And what I really, really, really wanted was to be awake. And what I gave to it was, I'm giving up an external career. I'm giving up relationship. I'm giving up money so I can go for it. So the question is, was there a time in your life when you really, really wanted something? A time when you just went for it and you made a lot of sacrifices for it. You might have been working on a degree or getting a new job. And you know that those times of intense desire and intense sacrifice can be really powerful times. When you drop the distractions and you focus on what you want, what really calls you, for many people, those are the peak experiences of their life. For many people, when you ask people who have made a lot of money, and you ask them about, when you look back, what was most exciting for you? What was most exciting for them was when, at the very beginning, when they were making it happen. They weren't sure they could do it, but they were totally focused. They gave up so much to make it happen. There were tremendously happy times for them. It's a paradox, isn't it? When you remove the distractions and you move toward what you want, there's an absorption that can occur that is tremendously, tremendously exciting. So that was my life for a lot of years. Tightly structured. removing all distractions. I kind of made a vow not to read anything other than scripture. So I gave up my beloved New Yorkers. And no radio, no TV. We would occasionally have movies in the ashram, but they were all like Disney movies, of course. They couldn't have anything suggestive in them. And through this seva, through 6.5 days a week. And here's the interesting thing too, is when you've got a community of a couple hundred people, I think we're around 300 at one point, all practicing celibacy, all in their 20s and 30s. Couple things: you work hard, you work out hard, and you eat a lot. So that was life. Really intense focus. I had a lot of interesting jobs over the years. I developed as a teacher. I did fundraising. I did marketing. I did all kinds of stuff. People came from all over the world to study and to practice with us. And my full-time job was helping to guide them in developing programs to be of support. And also having incredible breakthroughs in my practice. Kind of pushing boundaries in my practice. We did a lot of intensive practices. And a lot of fruit was coming out of like this willful style of life that I had. And in one day, or rather one weekend, that sense of myself as the doer completely changed. We had a teacher who came to our community, and his name was Rishi Prabhakar. And he had done a lot of training, I think, with the Indian government and so forth, and really interesting guy. And there are a couple things I wanted to say. I'm not going to go into the details, but at some point, the ashram where I lived completely came tumbling down. A lot of it was kind of abuse of power and so forth. But to the credit of the teacher, number one was when he noticed how devotional we were becoming, he did sort of cut back on offering the Shakti and so forth. He realized that we need to be more empowered rather than focused on him. He was also incredibly generous in bringing in other teachers. It was a really wonderful thing. So I got to study with a lot of world-class teachers. But with Rishi Prabhakar, when he came, he gave some talks. And the talks were really good talks. And a lot of them were this kind of language around resting in presence, around doing nothing as a practice, which was fascinating. So he was invited to lead us into a retreat, the entire community, a couple hundred people, 200-300 people. And he kind of taught these techniques, and he taught some breathing techniques. He taught mudras, and mudras are, these practices are, it's pretty wild. That you bring your like, for example, this is one of the classic mudras. But there are all these different mudras we would do with breath, and you would notice the effect of the mudras on your experience. But the primary thing we moved toward was meditation. Now, as I've shared this before, but I remember this so well, we were such strivers in our practice. I certainly was. I took copious notes all the time and so forth. I'm not going to do his accent because I know that's not PC anymore. But as he sat up front for this retreat, this like long weekend retreat, he looked around the room, long pause, and he said, "For this retreat, I want you to do nothing." A bunch of us wrote that down. And he saw us writing it down. He said, "No, I want you to do nothing." I remember very clearly. I wrote it down again and I underlined it. And then he said, "Put the pen down. For this retreat, I want you to do nothing." So we were all set out in a grid, We all had our little nest for practice. And I remember distinctly looking over my shoulder and thinking, I wonder if I'm doing nothing better than she's doing nothing. Over the course of that retreat, it was one of the most profound experiences I've had. The sense of doing nothing. And that was a profound takeaway for me. I'm aware that time has passed really, really quickly, so let me just say this. There are practices about doing that are tremendously helpful. That when you focus, when you concentrate, you gather your attention. You set up these riverbanks for your practice. Where are those practices leading you? And what I would offer is those practices lead you to presence. At some point, you put down the practice and you rest in presence. For many, many years, I thought the goal of practice was to be the witness, to be that non-preferential observer. And when it's like when you're in that place of the witness, you are the observer and you're not reactive, and so profound. The question becomes, what is it that's behind the witness? As Sri Nisargadatta says, to be the light behind the witness. And this points toward the practices of being. As I have just a couple minutes left, why don't we close with a short reflection? If you like, you can close your eyes. Notice the breath and just sense, if you can, just track the next 3 breaths. And notice the doing, the concentration. And now sense, if you can, the witness, who you are, through this lens of non-preferential awareness. Awake to what's happening, your capacity to let things be. And now imagine, if you can you imagine the light behind the witness? And to help you here, just explore the following questions. Is there anything right now, in the body or the mind, that could relax or soften or let go? As you're ready, you can deepen your breath. As you're ready, if you like, you can open your eyes. There are profound practices of doing that can help you to arrive. And equally, it's important to remember that there are practices about surrender, about letting go, about resting in presence. In the future, I'll be talking a little bit more about some of the other elements of my practice, how my practice has evolved. And I hope your practice feels alive and vibrant, and that it is opening you up into greater realms of possibility. Thank you so much. Great to have this time with you. I look forward to being with you again. Happy trails.